better get in your mind you're going to get yourself in shape. Because you've got just about 5 rough weeks coming up. 5 of the roughest weeks. And you're not going to make it if you don't do it. You better get out here on your own at night and run up down this street 3 or 4 times. You better start building that wind up. Because like I told you before, we're a team. We're not individuals anymore. We're a team.
My name is McKibben, and I am a lecturer and coordinator for the Public History Public Service Program at Stanford University, and recently the author of a new book on the Monterey Peninsula, specifically on Seaside and the relationship between Seaside and Fort Ord. It's called Racial Beachhead, Diversity and Democracy in a Military Town.
The goal for establishing Fort Ord and Seaside was when Dr. John Roberts believed that a military presence would make Seaside more valuable to the community of Seaside. However, the exact opposite occurred. Such close proximity to a military training ground set this area of Monterey aside as the least desirable place to live, to work, or to vacation. Fort Ord brought in different minority groups and, because of the ethnical diversity, completely took away tourist appeal.
Racial integration played a major role in the development of Seaside and affected African Americans, whites, Hispanics, and Asians. Soldiers and families of all races had experienced the full impact of integration in their lives on base over time and were poised to challenge segregation off base as well, not as racial blocs but together as an interracial community. Military life in the United States at mid-century offered people of color, particularly blacks, opportunity to participate as equal in American life.
Because it was a military town, it was founded and developed on a principle of inclusion and equality that was absolutely rare in American life at mid-century. And it came because of two things. First, the military explosion in the years build up to World War II and in the post-war years generated a huge out-migration from parts of the American South by African Americans and other parts of the depressed areas of the United States of people looking for work. In the 1930s, the Depression era, we saw an influx of population associated with this new defense industry. In Seaside, the migration happened because of that in a little bit, but it happened mostly because the military established Fort Ord along with Fort Dix and Fort Bliss in Texas, Fort Dix in New Jersey, as compassionate duty bases, as places where people of color were deliberately stationed, especially if they married outside of their race. And in the decade after World War II, Seaside saw its population skyrocket because of this new military policy of integration with Harry Truman's edict that required integration of the military and eliminated quotas for people of color, especially African Americans, and also designated Fort Ord as a compassionate duty base. So Seaside's population skyrocketed after the war years, and by 1954, because of this federal policy, Seaside was in a position to incorporate.
The Hart-Celler Immigration Act in 1965 opened the door to illegal immigration for Latin Americans, leading to unprecedented numbers. Most of these Mexican American immigrants established themselves in California in small growing cities that were affordable like Seaside. After the closure of Fort Ord, many families left and Seaside turned into a ghost town. Seaside became the affordable city in the Monterey Peninsula where the new Mexican American immigrants could afford to live in the 1990s. Real estate values increased dramatically everywhere else, but in Seaside, the out-migration of African Americans from the poorest sections of the city kept rent and housing prices low, thus attracting Mexican immigrants and Mexican Americans to these neighborhoods. After Fort Ord closed down, Seaside's economy was directly affected by the economic downfall at the end of World War II. This impacted Seaside with job loss, economic decline, the out-migration of African Americans by the thousands, and sharp decline in housing and housing prices.
In the 1990s, a huge population, mostly from Oaxaca and Jalisco, Mexico, came to the Monterey Peninsula to find work. It was a very common trend in California and throughout the nation in the 1990s. And this population was not connected to any kind of military migration as the other populations in Seaside had been. The new Mexican migration was not military. So Seaside is now facing a demographic transition that is, for the first time, does not include people who are familiar with the ways of the military. And yet, there's still this persistence of an ideology of inclusion in Seaside that really makes efforts to incorporate the new population. Seaside as a whole starts with a sensibility that everyone is included at the table and that there's a basic equality here. And that absolutely comes from the military, and it was bolstered by the civil rights movement. But it includes this new population of Mexicans and Mexican Americans. Seaside developed both as a minority-majority enclave, but also, and most importantly, as a military town.